The court clerk stopped counting after the 27th letter, not because the letters had ended, because his hands had begun to shake. One by one, he laid them across the long oak table before the king's bench, cream envelopes, grey envelopes, blue-edged mourning paper, some marked urgent, some marked personal, some sealed with wax that had cracked from age but had never been broken. Not one had been opened. The courtroom at St. James's Palace had been noisy only moments before. Nobles whispered behind fans, lawyers shuffled papers, gentlemen leaned toward one another with the greedy attention of people who had come to watch a duchess fall. But as the letters spread across the table, silence began to move through the chamber. By the time the clerk placed the 40th letter down, every eye had turned toward the Duke of Harrowmere. Duke Benedict Ashford stood near the front of the court in a dark coat, white cravat and polished boots, his face controlled with the cold pride that had made half of London fear him and the other half admire him. He had entered that room believing the court belonged to him. He had brought witnesses. He had brought lawyers. He had brought his mother, the Dowager Duchess, who sat in black silk behind him like a mourning statue. He had come to prove that his wife, Duchess Helena Ashford, had abandoned her marriage, hidden a child of uncertain parentage, and used her late father's fortune to defy the lawful authority of her husband. That was the story London knew. Helena had left Harrowmere House 5 years earlier, after a bitter quarrel. Benedict had not gone after her. He had told society she was unstable, proud, and impossible to reason with. He had told himself he was protecting the dignity of his name by refusing to answer her. Now the unopened letters lay between them, and dignity began to look like guilt. Helena stood on the opposite side of the court table, with one hand resting on the shoulder of a little girl in a pale dress. The child was 4 years old. Her name was Amabel. She had dark curls, grey eyes, and a solemn face too old for her small body. She did not speak. Physicians had examined her, nurses had coaxed her, priests had prayed over her. She made sounds sometimes, but never words. Not one clear word. Until that day, Lord Chancellor Wycliffe looked down at the letters, then at Benedict. "Your Grace," he said, "you stated in your petition that the Duchess made no serious effort to contact you after leaving Harrowmere House." Benedict's jaw tightened. "That is correct." The clerk coughed softly. The sound felt dangerous. Helena did not smile. She had not come to court to win with prettiness. She had come with 5 years of silence folded in wax. The Chancellor lifted one letter. "The seal is intact." "Yes, my lord," said the clerk. "And this was recovered from the Duke's London residence." "Yes, my lord." "From a locked writing cabinet in the private study." Benedict turned sharply. Helena's solicitor, Mr. Farlow, bowed. "With permission of the court, your grace." The cabinet was opened under legal order after the Duke submitted his petition regarding the child. Benedict's eyes hardened. "You violated my private study." Helena spoke for the first time. "You violated my life, Benedict. Your study survived." A murmur swept through the room. The Dowager Duchess tapped her fan once against her palm. A warning. Benedict heard it and stiffened, but he did not look back. The Chancellor gestured to the clerk. "Read the first date." The clerk lifted the earliest letter. October 4th, 1817. Helena's face tightened. "The morning after I left Harrowmere House." Benedict's expression did not change. The clerk lifted another. October 8th, 1817. Another. October 13th. Another. November 2nd. Then the letters began to tell their story without being opened. Dates during storms. Dates during illness. Dates after Helena's father died. Dates after the child's first fever. Dates after the Dowager visited Ravenshollow Lodge and demanded papers Helena refused to sign. Benedict's lawyer stood quickly. My lord, a pile of sealed letters proves only that letters existed. It does not prove His Grace received them, read them, or had reason to believe their contents credible. Helena turned her gaze toward Benedict. That is the point. He did not read them. Benedict finally looked at her directly. I had no reason to read letters from a wife who left my house in disgrace. Helena's eyes flashed. I left with blood on my gown and a newborn child in my arms. The room went still. Benedict's face tightened, not because he believed her, but because memory moved beneath his pride. A storm, a locked birthing room, his mother's pale face, a physician whispering that the child had not survived. Helena screaming from behind a door. Then Benedict leaving before dawn because grief, shame and anger had become too tangled to face. He had told himself she blamed him. His mother told him Helena had become irrational. His cousin, Lord Philip Carow, told him distance was the only way to protect the Ashford name. So Benedict chose distance. Then silence. Then contempt. The Chancellor turned to Helena. Your Grace, you may proceed. Helena drew a breath. My husband claims I hid his child from him. I did not. I wrote to him the day after she was born. I wrote when she lived through her fever. I wrote when she failed to speak. I wrote when physicians asked if silence ran in his bloodline. I wrote when his mother attempted to remove her from my custody. The Dowager stood. This is outrageous. The Chancellor's eyes moved to her. Sit down, Your Grace. The Dowager's face flushed. No one had commanded her publicly in years. She sat. Helena continued. I wrote when Lord Carow came to my father's estate with papers giving him control of my inheritance. Lord Philip Carow, Benedict's cousin, stood near the right wall. Elegant, silver-haired, smiling faintly. At Helena's words, his smile became still. Benedict noticed. For the first time, he noticed. Helena looked toward the clerk. Open the first letter. Benedict's voice cut through the room. No. Everyone turned. The word had come too quickly, too violently. The Chancellor studied him. On what grounds? Benedict had no answer ready. The truth was simple and shameful. He did not want the letter opened, because for 5 years, leaving it sealed had allowed him to decide what it meant. Once opened, it would speak for itself. The Chancellor nodded to the clerk. Open it. The seal broke. The sound was small. The effect was not. The clerk unfolded the page and began to read. My Lord Husband, I do not know what your mother has told you. I do not know what you believe. I know only this. Our daughter lives. She is weak, but she lives. I have named her Amabel after your grandmother because I still believe there is mercy somewhere in your bloodline. Come home. If you are angry with me, be angry in the room where your child breathes. Do not let others carry words between us while she lies between life and death. The clerk stopped. The court was silent. Benedict stared at the page. Our daughter lives. The words had existed for 5 years. In his study, under lock, unopened, his daughter stood less than 10 feet away. Helena placed her hand more firmly on Amabel's shoulder. She lived, Helena said quietly. No thanks to your answer. Benedict swallowed. I was told... He stopped. Helena's gaze sharpened. Yes, you were told many things. You simply chose never to ask me. Lord Carow stepped forward smoothly. My Lord Chancellor, may I remind the court that grief can produce dramatic accusations. The Duchess was distraught. His Grace was misled by confusion in a sick room. Amabel's head turned. The child looked directly at Lord Carow. Her small face changed. Fear moved across it. Helena felt her tremble. Amabel? The child lifted one hand and pointed toward the letters. The whole court watched. Helena knelt. "What is it, my darling?" Amabel's mouth opened. No sound came. Benedict found himself staring. He had expected resentment when he finally looked at the child, perhaps suspicion, perhaps indifference. He had not expected to see his own eyes. Amabel stepped away from Helena and toward the table. A footman moved as if to stop her, but the Chancellor lifted his hand. "Let her go." The child touched the opened letter. Then the pile of sealed ones. Then she looked at Benedict. Her lips trembled. For 4 years she had carried silence like a locked door. Now, before the court that had gathered to judge her mother, the door opened. "Read," she whispered. Helena covered her mouth. The courtroom froze. Amabel touched the letters again. "Papa, read." The words were broken. Soft. Imperfect. But they were words. Her first clear words. And they struck Benedict harder than any accusation. Papa read. Not father. Not duke. Papa. The word her mother must have used when reading his name aloud over letters he never opened. Benedict went pale. The child pointed at the pile. Mamma wrote, Papa read. A few ladies began to cry. The Chancellor leaned forward, his face changed by the terrible innocence of what had just happened. Benedict took one step toward the child. Amabel stepped back into Helena's skirts. That small retreat nearly broke him. Lord Caro spoke quickly. Children repeat what they are taught. Amabel turned on him suddenly, her face filled with fear. Then, clear enough for the whole court, she said one more word. Bad. Lord Caro froze. Helena went still. Benedict slowly turned toward his cousin. What does she mean? Caro laughed softly. This is absurd. Amabel hid her face, but her voice came again, muffled against Helena's gown. Bad man took baby. The courtroom erupted. The dowager's fan fell from her hand. Benedict looked at Helena. His voice was barely audible. What baby? Helena's eyes filled. The answer came like a blade that had waited 5 years to be drawn. Your son. No one spoke for several seconds. Not even the Chancellor. The word son seemed to hang above the court table, heavier than law, heavier than scandal, heavier than all the unopened letters laid beneath it. Benedict stared at Helena. My son. Helena held Amabel close. Our son. The Dowager Duchess rose so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This hearing must be stopped. Lord Chancellor Wycliffe turned slowly. Sit down. My lord, the Duchess is making wild claims based on the babbling of a child. The Chancellor's voice hardened. I said sit down. The Dowager sat, but her face had changed. For the first time, she looked afraid. Benedict saw it. That fear did more than Helena's accusation. Because his mother had ruled every room of his life with certainty. She had told him when to mourn, when to be angry, when to preserve the family name, when to stop listening. Now certainty had left her. Helena turned to the clerk. Open the second letter. The clerk obeyed. This one had been written 3 days after the first. My lord, I write again because no answer has come. I do not know whether your mother has reached you first. I do not know whether Lord Caro has repeated his threats in softer language. I will write plainly. I bore twins. Amabel lives. Samuel lived for 6 hours. Your mother forbade me from recording him. Lord Caro said a dead son is easier to manage than a living daughter with Ravensmere blood. I beg you, come home before they bury one child and steal the other's future. The clerk's voice faltered. Benedict gripped the table. Samuel, a son named Samuel. 6 hours. The court blurred. For 5 years, Benedict had allowed anger to sit where grief should have been. He had thought himself betrayed by a wife who left. He had thought himself wronged by a woman too proud to beg. But she had begged. 40 times. 50 times. 70 times perhaps. And he had left the truth sealed. Helena looked at him. "I asked you to come before the burial." His lips parted. No answer came. She continued, "I asked you to choose his name if you disliked mine. I asked you to see his face. I asked you to acknowledge Amabel before your mother found a way to make her disappear too." Benedict closed his eyes. "Helena?" "No," she said. The word was not loud. It stopped him anyway. "You do not get to say my name as if the sound of it hurts you more than your silence hurt me." The room went quiet again. Then Mrs. Agnes Bell was called. She entered slowly through the side door, an elderly nurse in a dark dress, with a small bundle wrapped in blue silk held against her chest. Amabel whimpered when she saw the bundle. Helena stroked her hair. "She remembers," Helena whispered. Benedict looked at his daughter. The child had been a newborn. How could she remember? But memory in children is not always images. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is a door closing. A voice shouting. A mother crying. Mrs. Bell placed the blue bundle on the evidence table. Inside was not a body. Only a ribbon. A baptismal ribbon. A tiny silver cross. And a page from a private chapel book. The Chancellor examined it. "Samuel Benedict Ashford," he read, "son of Benedict Ashford, Duke of Harrowmere, and Helena Ashford, Duchess of Harrowmere. Baptized October 5th, 1817. Benedict made a sound that was almost breath, almost pain. His son had had his name. Not in the official parish record, not in the family ledger, in a hidden chapel book no one meant him to see. The Chancellor looked at Mrs. Bell. "Who ordered the child omitted from the official record?" Mrs. Bell's hands shook. "The Dowager Duchess." The court erupted. The Dowager's voice cut through it. "I preserved the house." Benedict turned to her. From an infant? She lifted her chin. From scandal. From a wife whose father's fortune made her dangerous. From a daughter who could be used against you. From a dead son whose existence would complicate inheritance. Helena's face went white. "There it is," she whispered. "At last, the honest cruelty." Lord Carrow stepped forward. "Your Grace, do not answer further." The Dowager snapped. "Do not command me." That was when Benedict saw the crack between them. Carrow was not protecting his mother. He was protecting himself. The Chancellor asked Mrs. Bell, "What happened after the baptism?" Mrs. Bell looked at Helena. The Duchess nodded once. The nurse spoke. "The boy died before dawn. Her Grace asked for his Grace to be summoned. The Dowager said he had already left and would not return for a dead child. Lord Carrow arrived with documents before noon." "What documents?" the Chancellor asked. Helena's solicitor opened another packet. "Temporary transfer papers for the Ravensmere inheritance." Benedict frowned. "I never authorized them." Helena's eyes met his. "I know that now." Carrow smiled faintly. "My Lord Chancellor, in times of crisis, families prepare many papers that are never used." Helena turned toward him. "You used some of them." Carrow's smile thinned. "You cannot prove that." Amabel suddenly began to cry. Not loudly, not like a child seeking attention. Quietly, with terror. She pointed at Carrow. "Door," she said. "Mama door." Helena knelt. "What door, darling?" The child trembled. "Bad man. Lock Mama door." Benedict's face changed. Helena closed her eyes. The Chancellor leaned forward. "Duchess." Helena stood slowly. 2 years ago, Lord Carrow came to Ravensmere Lodge. He demanded the original birth pages, my father's trust papers, and the letters I had copied before sending them. When I refused, he locked me in the nursery for half a day while his men searched the house. A murmur of horror moved through the court. Caro's voice sharpened. "That is a lie!" Amabel screamed. Everyone froze. The child clapped both hands over her ears. "Not lie!" Her voice cracked across the room. "Not lie. 2 words. Clear. Terrified. True." Benedict looked at his cousin, the man who had advised him, comforted him, fed his pride, told him not to read, told him a wife who writes too often is trying to control the story. Caro lifted both hands slightly. "Benedict, grief is making this ugly. Do not let a child's fear rewrite facts." Benedict said nothing. The Chancellor spoke instead. "The original documents must be retrieved." Helena answered, "They are hidden." "Where?" Helena looked at the Dowager. "In the Dowager's private chapel at Harrowmere House, behind the memorial panel." The Dowager's face turned to stone. So Benedict felt the court looking at him. He turned to his mother. "Is that true?" She did not answer. Caro did. "Of course not." Benedict did not look at him. He looked at the woman who had taught him silence was dignity. Mother. For the first time in his life, his voice did not ask permission. The Dowager's lips trembled. "I did what your father would have done." That was not denial. The Chancellor rose. "This court will adjourn for 1 hour. Duke Harrowmere will retrieve the named items under court escort. The Duchess and child will remain here under guard. Lord Caro and the Dowager Duchess will not leave this room." Caro's face went pale, only for a second, but Benedict saw it. The ride to Harrowmere House felt unreal. Benedict sat in a carriage with 2 court officers, while the unopened letters lay in his lap. He had taken them from the table without asking. No one stopped him. The first letter remained open, the others still sealed. He touched the wax of one marked with black ribbon. Helena must have written it after Samuel's burial. He could open it now. He did not. Not because he refused, because he knew the court had to witness what he had ignored. That was his punishment. Truth could no longer arrive privately. At Harrowmere House, servants lined the entrance hall with pale faces. They knew. Of course they knew. Houses always know what masters pretend not to. Benedict went straight to his mother's private chapel. The memorial panel behind the altar bore his father's name, carved in marble beneath words about honor. Honor. The word nearly made him laugh. He pressed the hidden latch Helena had described. The panel opened. Inside was a velvet box. His hands shook as he lifted it out. Within lay Samuel's baptismal ribbon, a copy of the private chapel entry, several letters from Helena, and one note in Caro's hand. He read the note first. "Leave Benedict his anger. A wounded husband will ignore what a grieving father would investigate." Benedict closed his eyes. There it was, the full truth. Caro had not made him cruel. His mother had not made him silent. They had only used what was already there. His pride, his anger, his refusal to read. A young maid stepped from the side aisle. "Your Grace?" He turned. She held another packet. "I was told to burn these if anyone opened the panel." Benedict stared at her. "By whom?" "Lord Caro, Your Grace." She handed him the packet. On top was a sealed letter from Helena. This one was marked with a single word: please. Before Benedict could speak, bells began ringing from the court tower half a mile away. The court officer rushed to the chapel window. "Smoke, Your Grace." Benedict went cold. The officer turned. "It is coming from St. James. The letters, the witnesses. Helena, Amabel, Caro." Benedict ran. The courtroom was burning from the inside. Smoke poured from the lower windows of St. James Court as Benedict reached the steps with the velvet box under one arm and the packet of letters in his hand. People crowded the courtyard, nobles coughed into handkerchiefs, clerks carried ledgers, guards shouted for water. Benedict caught the first officer he saw. "The Duchess." "Still inside, Your Grace." "The child?" The officer did not answer quickly enough. Benedict pushed past him. Inside, the chamber had become a wall of smoke and flame. One curtain near the evidence table burned fiercely. Papers scattered across the floor. The court benches were overturned. Someone had tried to reach the evidence chest and failed. "Helena!" Benedict shouted. A cough answered. He turned toward the side alcove. Helena was there on the floor, shielding Amabel with her body. One of the fallen benches trapped the hem of her gown. The child clutched a bundle of letters to her chest. Even now, even in smoke, Amabel had tried to save the letters. Benedict reached them and tore the bench aside. Helena looked up, stunned to see him. "Clara first," she rasped. "Amabel," he corrected hoarsely. The name struck both of them. He had never spoken it before as a father. He lifted the child. Amabel coughed, eyes streaming. "Papa read." "Yes," he said, voice breaking. "Papa read." Helena stared at him. "The ribbon?" "I have it." "Caro's note?" "Yes." Behind them, a voice came through the smoke. Touching, Lord Philip Caro stepped from behind the clerk's table with a pistol in his hand. His fine coat was streaked with soot. His hair was loose. The calm mask he wore in drawing rooms had burned away. At his feet lay the evidence chest, forced open. "You should have stayed angry, Benedict," he said. "You were far more useful." Benedict placed Amabel behind him. Helena struggled to stand. Caro aimed the pistol. "Give me the box." "No. You have no idea what this will do to the family." Benedict's voice was low. "I know exactly what silence did to mine." Caro's face twisted. "Your wife would have ruled you through that inheritance. Your daughter would have been used by every Ravensmere creditor. Your dead son would have become another chain around your neck. We saved you." Helena's voice cut through the smoke. "You saved yourselves." Caro looked at her. "You should have accepted widowhood while your husband still lived. It would have been kinder." Benedict moved. Helena caught his sleeve. "No, do not make his trial easier by killing him." Caro smiled. "Still correcting him. No wonder he hated your letters." The words struck Benedict because they were true enough to hurt. He had hated the letters before reading them, not because of what they said, because they asked him to become a better man before he was ready. Caro lifted the pistol toward Helena. Amabel's small voice broke through the smoke. "Bad man!" Caro's eyes flicked toward the child. That was his mistake. Benedict threw the velvet box to the left. Caro turned instinctively. Helena seized the heavy court seal from the table and struck his wrist. The pistol fired into the ceiling. Benedict lunged and drove Caro to the floor. Guards burst in moments later, dragging him back as he shouted that he had only done what the Dowager wanted. The court heard that part. So did the Dowager, who stood in the doorway under guard, pale as death. By evening, the hearing resumed in a smaller chamber. No silk display, no eager whispering, no grand spectacle, only smoke-stained people, rescued evidence, and a truth too ugly to decorate. The Chancellor opened the velvet box himself. Samuel's ribbon was placed on the table. The private baptism entry. The Dowager's hidden instructions. Caro's note. The letters marked urgent. The letter marked please. Then the entire pile of unopened letters was laid before Benedict. The Chancellor spoke. "This court recognizes Lady Amabel Ashford as the lawful daughter of Duke Benedict Ashford and Duchess Helena Ashford. The baptismal record of Samuel Benedict Ashford will be restored." Attempts to suppress records, isolate the Duchess, seize inheritance, and interfere with custody shall be referred for criminal judgment. The Dowager whispered, "I protected the name." Benedict turned to her. "No, you protected control." She flinched. That was the first time he had ever wounded her with truth. Caro was taken away under guard. He did not look polished now, only small. The Dowager was escorted out after him, still insisting that history would understand her. History often understands cruel people. It does not always forgive them. When the room quieted, Benedict turned toward Helena. She stood with Amabel beside her, one hand resting on their daughter's shoulder. Their daughter. The words still felt new. Not soft, heavy. He walked to the table and picked up the first unopened letter. Then he lowered himself to one knee. Gasps moved through the chamber. Helena froze. Benedict bowed his head. "Helena Margaret Ashford," he said, using her full name, not the cold title he had hidden behind for years. "I left your letters unopened because anger was easier than truth. I let my mother speak for you. I let Caro guide me. I let pride decide what kind of woman you were, what kind of child Amabel was, and what kind of father I did not have to become." His voice shook. "I did not know everything. That is true. But I knew you were writing. I knew you were asking to be heard. I knew pain sat behind every seal, and I chose not to break them because I feared they would demand courage from me." Helena's eyes filled, but she did not soften. Not fully. Good. He did not deserve easy softness. "I cannot return Samuel's 6 hours. I cannot stand beside you on the morning you buried him. I cannot hear Amabel's first words in the private peace where they belonged. I cannot give back 5 years of silence." He lifted the sealed letter marked "Please." "But before this court, before our daughter, before the memory of our son, and before every word I refuse to read, I ask forgiveness. Not as your husband demanding mercy, as the man who failed you asking where truth may begin." No one spoke. Helena looked down at him for a long time. Then she said, "Stand." He stood. Her voice was quiet. "Forgiveness is not a door you open because shame finally knocks. I know. Trust is not restored because witnesses saw you kneel. I know. I will not return to Harrowmere because you finally suffered in public." His eyes lowered. "I know." Amabel tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mama," she whispered. Helena knelt. The child looked at Benedict, then at the letters. Papa read Samuel. The room changed. Benedict closed his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I will read Samuel. I will read every letter." Amabel frowned with the solemn authority of a child who had found her voice and intended to use it. Now, a faint sound moved through the room. Not laughter exactly, something gentler. Helena took Samuel's ribbon from the table and placed it in Benedict's hand. "That is not forgiveness," she said. He held it carefully. "What is it?" "Responsibility." He nodded. This time he understood the difference. The letters were read over 7 nights. Not in the court, not before gossip. At Ravensmere Lodge, where Helena had lived through the years, Benedict refused to enter. He came only when invited. The first night he read the first 5 letters aloud. Helena sat across from him with Amabel in her lap. When his voice broke, Helena did not comfort him. When he apologized, she did not rush to absolve him. When Amabel fell asleep, he lowered his voice and continued reading because Helena had once written into silence, and now silence would listen. Some letters were desperate, some angry, some painfully tender. Some contained details of Amabel's fever. Some described Samuel's burial. One contained only one sentence. "Why is your pride louder than our child's grave?" Benedict read that sentence 3 times before he could continue. Weeks passed. Harrowmere House changed. The dowager was removed to the northern dower estate with no authority over children, servants, records, or correspondence. Caro awaited trial. Samuel's name was carved in the family chapel. Amabel's birth was entered publicly. Benedict ordered the locked cabinet from his London study brought to Ravensmere. Then he burned it in the courtyard. Not the letters, the cabinet. The place where he had stored silence and mistaken it for control. Helena watched from the steps. Amabel held her hand. When the flames died, Benedict turned to his wife. "I thought unopened letters could not accuse me." Helena answered, "They accused you louder because they stayed sealed." He bowed his head. "Yes." Months later, Amabel spoke often. Not always clearly, not always to everyone, but to Helena. To her nurse, sometimes to Benedict. Her favourite word became red. She would bring him folded scraps of paper covered in childish marks and command, "Read." And he did. Every time. One evening, as winter settled over Ravensmere, Helena found Benedict in the small library, with Amabel asleep against his side. In his hand was the letter marked "Please." Helena stopped in the doorway. "You still read that one?" "Yes." "Why?" He looked down at the seal, broken now. "Because it is the letter I least deserved and most needed." Helena came closer. The firelight touched her face. There was no easy reunion between them. No sudden romance, no perfect repair, but there was something honest in the room that had not existed before. Truth. And sometimes truth is the first mercy wounded people can bear. Benedict looked at their sleeping daughter. "She exposed me before the court." Helena shook her head. "No, your silence exposed you. Amabel only gave it words." He closed his eyes. Yes. Years later, the court remembered the scandal. The unopened letters spread across the table. The dead son named at last. The fire. The Duke kneeling before the woman he had tried to condemn. But the part no one forgot was the child. The silent little girl who had listened to her mother speak to sealed envelopes year after year. The daughter who stood before judges, nobles, liars, and blood relatives and said the one word her father had avoided for 5 years. Read. And at last he did.